Sigmund Freud's main idea is that people believe in God because they have a strong, they feel a strong desire that there should be a heavenly daddy, a cosmic father figure that will make the world more comforting. So in this lecture, we're going to look at what Freud thinks about belief in God and decide how this relates to our choice between naturalism and monotheism, or more specifically, just how this relates to whether or not we should believe in God. So Sigmund Freud is the father of psychoanalysis, which is a particular kind of psychological theory, and it's kind of past its prime in the sense that a lot of psychologists don't hold to it today, but in the first part of the 20th century, it really dominated the field. And he's certainly one of the founders of modern psychology and a very creative and ingenious thinker. His years are 1856 to 1939, and we're talking about his views on religion as expressed in his book, The Future of an Illusion, published in 1927. And of course, our reading was from a really excellent philosopher of religion named William Rowe, recently retired from Purdue University. So Freud's approach is built on what I would call a speculative prehistory of the human race. He's speculating about what must have been in the early stages of human society, kind of in the youth of the human race. And he thinks that the main purpose of society is that we have to band together to protect ourselves from cruel nature. And an early stage in our development, he supposes, is the humanization of nature. We're primed to view the forces of nature as powerful persons, Freud thinks, because of our experience as infants when we were at the mercies of our parents. So we view the wind as a powerful self, as a god or a spirit, and the sun is one too, and the ocean and so on. There's another step, Freud thinks. It's the second step. Instead of thinking that the natural events are directly under the control of spirits or gods, one believes in laws of nature, that there are regularities which govern, in some sense, what occurs in the world, that it's a regular, orderly, in some sense, machine-like world. But still, one believes in gods, Freud says, and in the system, the gods retain three functions. First, they take away the terror of nature. They make us able to deal with life in this sort of world. They reconcile us to the cruelty of fate. Fate just means here what's unavoidable, and he especially has in mind death. Right? Sooner or later, each one of us is going to assume room temperature, and there's nothing you can do about that. And so gods, maybe belief in gods can reconcile to this. Maybe we'll believe in an afterlife, or believe that it's under their control and that they're merciful. And thirdly, the gods, he says, compensate us for our losses incurred by living in civilization. So when we live together, we thereby agree um, to restrain our desires, to not steal, to not kill, and so on. And it sort of hurts to be restrained in that way. And maybe the gods are pleased with this, though, and this will gain us favor with them. So his thoughts about human flourishing and conventional morality are kind of similar to the sophistic theory expounded by Glaucon in Plato's Republic. Um, there's a third stage, though. He holds that slowly as knowledge advances, and he's imagining now something I think more in the modern era. He says the role of the gods is reduced to compensation for our suffering and perhaps punishment of the wicked. They're relegated to the moral realm. So the idea is that maybe you don't believe in miracles anymore. Nature just kind of runs on its own, under its own power. But there are still these gods, at least, to serve the purpose of there being justice in the world. So Freud says, thus a store of ideas is created, born from man's need to make his helplessness tolerable and built up from the material of memories of the helplessness of his own childhood and the childhood of the human race. So the basic idea is living in society requires that we surrender our desires. We do this because nature is cruel and this is the only way we can get by. And we postulate basically gods or spirits in the natural world at first, and then we kind of shove them outside the system because we think that nature can run on its own, but we still have belief in gods. Now the main thing that Freud is concerned with here is not belief in gods, not polytheism, but rather monotheism. Freud was from a Jewish background, but I believe he was an atheist his whole adult life. And so that's really what he has in mind when he talks about religious beliefs. So again, the basic idea is that we need a kind of father figure who will take care of us, who will protect us, who will hear our prayers, and so on. And people believe in God, basically, as we'll see, because they want to, not because they have any evidence of it. That's what Freud supposes. It's not obvious how this would apply to other religions. Belief in Tao, as in Taoism or Buddhism, belief in the Buddha nature and things like that. So really he has in mind the origin of belief in God, that is monotheism. That's what he's principally concerned about. And in Freud's view, there isn't any creator God. Freud says that religious beliefs are illusions. And I've got a duck-rabbit illusion here. Of course, that's an optical illusion. It's just a play on words. But what does Freud mean when he says that belief in God is an illusion? Well, he's pretty specific about what he means. Illusion is a technical term for him. And he says that this is what it means to call belief in God an illusion. Illusions can't be proven, and they can't be disproven. Some of them are improbable, that is probably false, given what information we have, and some are flat incompatible with what we know. But notice that they're not defined as false. These beliefs, he says, which are illusions, are not based on experience, and they're not based on reasoning. But they do come from wishful thinking. So wishful thinking is where a person wants something to be true, and because they want it to be true, that causes them to believe it's true. That's what wishful thinking is. Freud gives some of his own examples of illusions. These are on page 208 in the reading. One example he gives is, he says, one may describe as an illusion the assertion made by certain nationalists that the Indo-Germanic race is the only one capable of civilization, or the belief, which was only destroyed by psychoanalysis, that children are creatures without sexuality. So those are things that certain people wanted to believe, things that people wanted to be true, and because they wanted them to be true, they formed the belief that they were true. So these beliefs resulted from wishful thinking. Another example he gives is, this is the one that Rowe gives. Suppose a certain woman is running for a seat in the United States Senate, a position she has longed to obtain for some years. To win the election would satisfy some of her deepest wishes. She believes fervently that she will be successful. Is her belief an illusion? And the idea is that the person would hold the belief whether or not there was any evidence for it. And so, again, Freud holds that belief in God is this type of belief. It's the result of wishful thinking. We long for a cosmic father figure that will basically make the world a safer and less scary place for us to live in. So notice that an illusion is not defined as a false belief. Sometimes we use the word that way, but that's not how Freud is using it. An illusion is just a belief that's not based on evidence and which does come from wishful thinking. And an illusion can be true or false, so an illusion is not by definition false. It is by definition, however, unjustified. It's by definition lacking in evidence. Now, Freud was not an epistemologist. He was a psychologist, so he doesn't quite put it this way. But what he says that a belief that's an illusion is not based on experience or reasoning, that it can't be proven or disproven, what he means is there's not adequate evidence for it. So an illusion is defined as something which is a mere belief and which isn't known and which isn't even reasonably believed. At least there's not much reason for it either way. Now, of course, believers don't like this. Freud, he hasn't defined their beliefs as false, but he has defined them as unjustified. And of course, certain thoughtful believers are going to take exception to this, as Rowe notes. Another thing that's interesting about Freud's book is that he predicts and he advises that human civilization should just get rid of religion. He thinks religion, that is mainly belief in God, has had plenty of time to prove itself, and it doesn't make us happier or better. He thinks that religious doctrines are now irrelevant to civilization. They maybe contain some truths expressed in symbolic form, but that's about as much good as they are. Well, if he thought religion was going to go anytime soon, that turned out to be pretty wrong. Rowe has an interesting comment here on page 212. He says, whether Freud's view of the future of religion is correct or merely the expression of his own illusion is a question which only the future can answer for us. What does seem clear, however, is that in judging the worth of religious beliefs, Freud is all the while supposing these beliefs to be false. Yes, that's right. He is assuming that. And we have to ask whether he's committing the genetic fallacy. This is a fallacy of this form. You say a belief that P comes from a certain source S, and therefore it's true. Or belief that P comes from certain source S, and therefore it's false. And this can be an invalid inference. Right? If the source is perfectly reliable, then it would follow that P is true. If the source S only puts out false beliefs, then it would follow that it was false. But look, sometimes the source of a belief just isn't relevant to its truth or falsity. Sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. So you don't want to confuse the cause of a belief with the justification or evidence for a belief. Those are two different things. Now, it's interesting that Freud doesn't commit this fallacy himself. He knows that he has not proven atheism. He hasn't proven it, he's just assuming atheism. His interest is giving a natural explanation of where belief in God comes from. So Freud doesn't make this mistake, but a lot of lesser thinkers have. So in the next segment, we'll look at an argument that Rowe says is implicit in Freud against monotheism.